Just give me a second here while I share a screen and get this started. So first of all, I'd just like to give a kind of a brief update on the Animal Sheltering Committee and what we've been up to. All of last year, or most of last year, we've been really busy with the minimum standards for animal shelters for the state of New Mexico. That is something that will eventually become law in the state, and using some of the spay and neuter administrative funds from the spay and neuter fund, they will be hiring an animal shelter inspector to basically enforce the minimum standards. So that's what we've been focusing on for the past year. I think it was back in October, we were able to present a final draft to the vet board, and which they voted to accept, and we were just about ready to start all the public hearings on those minimum standards when COVID crazy hit. So it's kind of been put on the back burner just because they really do want public input and public hearings for those minimum standards. So anything that the shelter committee does or the vet board does is definitely involved with the Mexico Vet Board, and it's on their website. So follow that website for meeting notices, agendas, anything that you want to be involved in. That is the place to go as far as getting those updates. So hopefully soon in the future, we will have those public hearings for the minimum standards at the same time as we'll be going forward with these designated spay and neuter funds and how we're going to handle those. So I just wanted to let everybody know the shelter committee is a committee of 5 people, all with very specific roles underneath the vet board. We've been a small but mighty group, and actually our public member position is open. So right now there's only 4 people on the committee. Then the public spot is currently vacant, but Dr. Nicole Vigil from Albuquerque Welfare is on the committee. Brittany Burkett, also from Albuquerque, is on the committee. And then Penny Wardlow from Taos, and then myself. And again, we have specific roles that we have to fill on that committee, but we are a committee underneath the vet board, and we give them recommendations, and the vet board finalizes those things. So there's also, for those minimum standard drafts, there is a copy on that website, and there is an email address that you can submit comments or questions to if you have some feedback on those minimum standards, even before we have public hearings. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica, and she will take over for the presentation to let us know exactly what SB 57 is, and then I'll go into a little bit more about how we're going to implement it.
Okay, thank you, Stacie. Let me see if this. Oh. Okay. There we go. Just had to get the technology to work for me. Okay, so first, in talking about Senate Bill 57, I want to just take us a step back to talk about, what is the problem that this legislation tried to solve. And I'm sure many of you who are attending this evening are familiar with the fact that New Mexico has long had a companion animal overpopulation problem. And so what you're seeing on your screen right now are some excerpts from a couple of our Making Tracks magazine a couple issues ago, where we highlighted the new updated statewide animal shelter survey that Animal Protection of New Mexico took on. And, so we're, in doing the survey, we're wanting to see, what is the issue? How many dogs and cats are coming into our shelters? How many are euthanized? How many are adopted? How many are transferred? Just trying to really look at the data and make sure that, our solutions and where we want to go is guided by that data. So you can find this information and more on our website at apnm.org. But you can see that, this was data from the year 2017. So based on the survey results, and also having to do some estimated calculations from shelters who did not respond to the survey, we were able to determine that about 100,000 dogs and cats are coming into our state's shelters annually. About 73,000 of them are live exits, meaning they are either returned to owner, adopted out, or transferred to another facility, usually out of state. And then you can see that about 1/5 of the dogs and cats that come into our shelters are euthanized every year. Now, the good news is that these numbers are actually much better in terms of keeping our state's animals alive, much better than 5 years ago. But what we're seeing is that the reason for that is that so many of our animals are being transferred out of state, and the money that our local communities, our local governments, and our nonprofits are spending to address this problem has ballooned over the last 5 years. So it's really not a sustainable solution. And you know, and there are a lot of effects of companion animal overpopulation. You know, there is the suffering of the animals. There's also the suffering of people who work in animal sheltering. It's hard work, especially when you are having to euthanize healthy animals simply for a lack of homes and too many more animals coming into the shelter. There's not enough space for them. There's other issues like, you know, public health and safety, traffic collisions, and, you know, and the cost of the work that goes into animal control and animal cruelty. It's all tied in together. So we know all of the experts agree that the major answer to this problem is spaying and neutering our animals so there are not any more unwanted litters without homes to go to. And New Mexico has been tackling this problem for many, many years. And so, you know, a couple of the really institutionalized solutions that we've seen so far is back in 2009, a spay neuter license plate was created. So you can go to MVD. The fee is a little bit more to pay for this plate, and then part of those funds go to a statewide spay neuter account. There's also, as of 2015, an option. You can use the PIT-D form when filing your tax returns to select a recipient for to receive a donation from your from a tax return if you're getting money back. So, you know, that's been able to bring in some revenue into the statewide spay neuter account. But it just hasn't been enough to tackle the huge problem that we have here. And so in 2012, the New Mexico State Senate requested a study to really look at this issue and find out what is it that we need, how much money do we need to invest into spay and neuter, and where can we get that money? And so what many of you have probably heard about if you've been following this issue is there was a feasibility study that was conducted, and this whole report was written. And in that feasibility study, the author compared all of the funding mechanisms that many other states or localities have already used to try to bring in money to fund low-cost spay neuter for our communities. And so compared those different funding mechanisms to see which one is going to be the best, looking at multiple factors. And what you can see from this chart is that there was one solution, one funding mechanism that really stood out above the rest. And so that was looking at the pet food manufacturing and distribution process and applying fees in that area that would then go to spay neuter. So All of that research and all of that data is what led us to Senate Bill 57. And Senate Bill 57, that bill number is the number that was assigned to it this year in 2020 when it was introduced. Every year that bills are introduced, they're assigned different numbers based on the order in which they're introduced that year amongst all the other bills that are introduced. So there have been other bill numbers in the past, but Senate Bill 57 is the one that was introduced this year. And so what the bill did is it applied what will be a $100 fee per dog or cat food or treat product sold in New Mexico. And that fee would be phased in over 3 years. So actually the first year that this bill is in effect, that the new law is in effect, it's just going to be $50 a year per product. Then it'll go up to $75 the following year, and in year 3 and beyond, it'll be $100 per year per product. A couple of important points that we've always liked to make clear from the outset: the fee only applies to dog and cat food and treat products. So it doesn't apply to livestock feed, it doesn't apply to gerbil food or fish food, it's just dogs and cats. It also doesn't apply to prescription diets. So, you know, to the extent that there is a sliver of a chance that the fee could impact something to do with the food market, we wanted to make sure that prescription diets were not affected. There's also an exemption for small businesses. You know, there are small manufacturers and startups, a lot of companies making, you know, boutique or specialty foods for dogs and cats. And if they're bringing in $3 million a year or less in gross revenue, they don't have to pay the fee on any of their products. And then to be clear, you know, this is not a fee or a tax on retailers or consumers. It's only being applied at the pet food, the dog and cat food manufacturer level, because it's the manufacturers that register their products in our state every year and already have to pay various annual fees associated with that. And so they're the ones that would then pay this spay and neuter fee. The bill also includes a 6-year sunset clause, which basically means that after about 6 years, the law would be retired. It would disappear unless it was renewed. And so that kind of gives the legislature an opportunity to look at this again and you know, really, I think helps hold everyone accountable and making sure that the money is spent well, that we're getting the results that we want to get. And so after that 6 years, there's a chance to just make sure we're moving in the right direction with this new law. Some of the logistics around this. So the fee is collected by the New Mexico Department of Agriculture. That is the state agency that manages dog and cat food manufacturer product registration already. So this would just be an additional fee collected by that agency. And most of the funds are then transferred to the New Mexico Board of Veterinary Medicine for their use and distribution for spay-neuter services. What do I mean when I say most of the funds? Well, on the left side of your screen here, you can see the breakdown. So when the New Mexico Department of Agriculture collects the fees, they're allowed to keep 4% of the annual fees in order to pay for the fee registration enforcement. And, you know, and that's important because, you know, a lot of the infrastructure is already there, but there may be a little bit of an increase in the agency's workload to enforce this fee, collect the fees, do monitoring to make sure everything is in accordance with the law. So the remaining 96% will go to the New Mexico Board of Veterinary Medicine. And then the board can use 5% towards the enforcement of the Animal Sheltering Act. And that is also really important because, like what Stacie was saying, you know, the work of the Animal Sheltering Committee, which now operates under the Board of Veterinary Medicine, that committee used to be a separate board, And then the vet board has now taken on that responsibility by having that committee move there. But there wasn't any additional regular funding that came with that. And so in order to make sure that the Animal Sheltering Act is properly followed and enforced, and that includes not just distribution of spay-neuter funds, but also looking at shelter, minimum shelter standards, looking at enforcing the law and regulating shelter euthanasia and euthanasia drugs. You know, so that's really important. So then about 91% of the total funds is what will be applied directly to providing spay-neuter surgeries. And so based on the number of products that have been registered in our state every year, we've been able to project how much money we expect to come in. So we're expecting almost $1.5 million a year once the full fees have been phased in over that 3-year phase-in period. And so then a huge chunk of that, over 1.3 million per year, that's that 91% of the funds that's going directly towards the spay-neuter services. It's going to result in a lot of spay-neuter surgeries provided for the animals of families across our state. And, you know, and we also made sure that there was no evidence that this was going to have any kind of weird side effect or negative impact. So, you know, if manufacturers don't want to pay the fee and pass it along to consumers, it would result on average only about $1.50 a year per animal, which I really haven't, you know, haven't met anyone yet that hasn't said, you know, $1.50, I'm willing to, you know, as a consumer, I'd be willing to donate that, you know, in buying dog or cat food if it means that fewer dogs and cats will be euthanized. And we know that because we looked at 3 other states that had already enacted this same funding mechanism to pay for spay-neuter, low-cost spay-neuter services. So those states were Maine, West Virginia, and Maryland. And so on your screen here, you're seeing a few testimonials. You know, we did outreach. We were trying to find, is there any evidence that this won't work, that this will have a bad impact on consumers? Will it have a bad impact on the pet food industry or local retailers? And we didn't find any evidence of that. Everything that we saw said this is going to work. Maine has had this in place the longest for almost 2 decades, and their euthanasia rate is down to 4%, which is incredible. So it was great that we didn't have to reinvent the wheel, that we knew that this is something that would work. And I just want to note, I'm seeing a lot of great questions come into the Q&A. I think what we're going to do is we're going to get to the end of the presentation and then answer those at the end. So thank you for hanging tight, and please keep typing in your questions too. So the great news is that Senate Bill 57 did pass this year, and it was signed into law by Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham. And so the bill itself took effect on July 1st of this year. So it is now the law of the land here in New Mexico. But the way the bill was written is because the pet food manufacturers really register and pay their fees on an annual basis. The fee collection from Senate Bill 57 isn't going to start until January of next year, January 2021. So we have a few more months before we get to that point. And before that, the agencies that are responsible for making the law work on the ground, they have to pass rules that spell out exactly how they're going to do that work and carry out the law. So the New Mexico Department of Agriculture has already started that work. They posted their proposed rule a couple of months ago and held a public hearing. The public comment period has closed. So we're expecting that the rule finalization should be happening shortly. And then I will now be passing it back to Stacie, who's going to talk about the New Mexico Board of Veterinary Medicine and the work that they're going to start doing towards their part in this law, and some of what she's anticipating. So back to you, Stacie.
Thank you, Jessica. So like Jessica stated in the past, license plate fees and tax write-offs have totaled about $70,000 to $90,000 per year. There was no formal application process. The Animal Sheltering Committee, or board at that time, they were a board, not a committee, would meet and decide how to distribute funds, and they used that great APNM survey data to help them do that. They really targeted areas of high intake and high euthanasia, and they used kind of that data to decide how they were going to distribute those funds. There certainly was a reporting process. However, I don't feel like it was very formal. I told on myself, and I think we got funds in like 2014, shortly after I got here, and we never reported what we did with them. So I told on myself, but there was no follow-up. There was really nothing that came with that. So there definitely, again, was a reporting process. It just wasn't very formal. As far as I know right now, there's still a small amount of funds that need to be distributed. We just haven't been able to meet as a sheltering committee to distribute those funds, and at this point might just wait and roll those over, but we'll see. We haven't met yet to discuss that. So again, looking at the data that they would use to make decisions, the sheltering committee now underneath the veterinary board, I think, has a lot more data available to us besides the APNM shelter survey. Certainly is a huge resource and a great tool. Looking at the data that came in, 88% of strays are still coming in unsterilized, and 82% of owner surrenders are still coming in unsterilized. So that's still a huge amount of unsterilized animals in New Mexico. But being underneath the veterinary board now, we now have shelter licenses that we have to apply for every year, and euthanasia agencies. Usually they end up being one and the same, but they are two different types of licenses. And then we will also have those minimum standards available to us, and inspection reports and that types of thing. When that gets off the ground, we'll have that data available to us in order to kind of weigh projects and help target funds as well. And I wanted to look at using that APNM data and looking at some of what's available and what we're looking at. I chose to look at San Juan County and deeper dive into the data. And I said I could pick on San Juan County because that's where I am. So the Aztec Animal Shelter and the Farmington Regional Animal Shelter, we both serve San Juan County, which is land-wise one of the largest counties in the state. All told, our combined intake is the third highest in the state. Albuquerque is obviously number one at about just over 13,000 animals. Las Cruces is number two at about 11,000, and then San Juan County total is right up there with almost 10,000. And then there's a pretty large gap, and then Valencia County is about 4,000. So really those top three places to look at are with the highest intake. We have been doing large amounts of spay and neuter in the county for quite a long time. I know the Aztec Shelter, and we have a few nonprofits like San Juan Animal League, has been working at it for a long time. And then finally in 2014, the Farmington Animal Shelter was able to join in and did a public spay and neuter program as well. We have done well over 7,000 surgeries since the inception of our program here at the shelter. However, we're not seeing a decrease in intake. Overall, in the last 10 to 15 years, yes, we have definitely seen a decrease in intake, but for the last 5 years, we've remained at about 7,000 animals intake per year, despite our spay and neuter efforts. And I had a vet friend ask me, well, is spay and neuter really the answer? And I can tell you, yes, it still definitely is the answer. I've never seen so many puppies and kittens in my life that continue to come in. I just think it's the proportion of unaltered animals is so high to the ones that we have altered. For every animal we alter, I think there's probably 10 to 15 that aren't. And so we're just fighting an uphill battle. And so looking at this data of deeper dive into the data from APNM is what does the picture truly look like in some of these areas? And And obviously we've been doing great, but it feels like we've been treading water, and certainly funds like this to sustain the spay neuter and increase it are going to help us tremendously. So what we know, like I said, USDA will collect the funds, they will disperse to the New Mexico Vet Board. The shelter committee will make recommendations of how to disperse those funds, but the vet board has to have final approval of that. And then the funds will be distributed. So looking at the first year, we don't know how much for sure how many funds will be in, but it's looking around probably about $500,000 or more will be available to us after that January 1 due date of when the manufacturers have to pay that. So that's kind of where we're going right now is, and I'll go over a little bit more of a timeline, but so that's just kind of what we do know for sure is what's going on is that obviously they will collect the funds, the committee will make the recommendations, and the vet board will make the final decision, and then it'll be distributed. So just one little note in the bill was that assistance from nonprofits to recipients have to have a household income that does not exceed 200% of current federal poverty level guidelines, which I included there in that slide, what the guidelines are for 2020. That might change for 2021, but probably not too much. Interestingly enough, there are no restrictions on shelters and government agencies that will distribute funds or decide how to distribute funds. Or give recipients to. There's no income requirements on those, but if you are a nonprofit, there are those restrictions that you're looking at the lower income to help lower income folks. So that's just one kind of side effect or one side note for the bill as far as what possible restrictions there are. So I want to be clear that the shelter committee has not met. So none of this is set in stone as far as what we're going to do. I kind of looked at what other states have done and what made sense to me. And then hopefully this fall and winter, the shelter committee will meet and we'll make a lot more decisions. And we have a lot of work ahead of us. So this is just kind of some ideas of some things that we could do. It's just, we have not had a chance to meet in person because we feel like it's something that needs to be met in person and also get that public input. So this is just possible criteria for disbursement of those funds. Maryland has a great application. It's all online. There's a picture of it there. It is 8 pages long, but there's a lot of text, so it doesn't look like it's too horribly difficult. But definitely nonprofit organizations, animal shelters, and euthanasia agencies can all apply for these funds. Definitely need to highlight the needs for your project and then narrow down that focus. I think having really good narrow focus projects are always a good thing. And then designated funds of what the funds are going to be used for. At this point, everything's a possibility, and there's a good chance that equipment or staff would be allowed to be asked for with these funds. Can't say yes, can't say no at this point. It hasn't been decided, but I did notice a few proposals from other states did include things like equipment and possibly staff, especially if it's a contract vet or something like that. And then just like I said, project funds, knowing what your project is and what you're targeting is going to help knowing who we're going to disperse these funds to. The reporting process, like Jessica said, is very important. We have to be able to report our progress and show that this is making the impact that we want it to make. I think that's extremely important. So the reporting process has to be formal, and there has to be follow-up and accountability for that. It has to be traceable. Definitely simple but complete, so we can mine out those numbers that we need to. It needs to be reported if targets are being met or exceeded. I think everybody's funds or projects need to have targets in mind, and we need to know if those were met or exceeded, and then projects completed or ongoing. Again, I included a little snapshot of what some of the projects are and some of the feedback and the reporting that they are getting. And both West Virginia and Maryland have an annual report that they put out with the numbers of procedures, what percentage of targets have been met or exceeded, and the funds spent and all that stuff. So definitely having that reporting process be formalized with some accountability is going to do nothing but help our our goals. Again, looking at kind of the impacts with West Virginia, in 1 year, they did almost 9,000 animals altered in 45 of 55 counties. And then Maryland, after 5 funding cycles, have completed almost or just over 5,600 or 56,000 procedures. Their live release rate in Maryland is up 22.1%. The funny part is they said their intake wasn't down at all, but that's because they're transferring animals in. So I think all of us who work in shelters in New Mexico know how hard we have to work to transfer animals out because we have no other alternatives a lot of time. And so to get to the point where we might be looking at transferring animals in would be amazing so that we could pay back some of those communities that have been helping us out. But really it's switching that thought of instead of shipping all the animals out to other areas, we won't be producing so many and we can actually help with that. So it's kind of funny looking at Maryland that their live release rate is up so high, but their intake isn't down because they're actually transferring animals into the area now instead of having to euthanize or transfer them out. So kind of the rough numbers that Jessica mentioned earlier with the APNM data, you know, the estimated state intake is around that 96,000 to 100,000 animals, and that euthanasia rate or number of euthanasias around 18,000 to 20,000, because there are those shelters that haven't reported. So about an 81% save rate or so, and the gap to get to 90%, which is a lot of people's benchmarks, would be about 8,500 to 9,000 animals. So looking at the impacts that West Virginia and Maryland had right away, it's possible to get to that, close that gap pretty quickly with the number of surgeries that are a possibility now with this funding. So some of the next steps. Like I said, the Animal Sheltering Committee, we have a lot of work ahead of us. We have to develop that application process, and we have to develop that reporting process. Both of those need to be approved by the New Mexico Vet Board. And then after that, we can actually open up the application process. After that application process goes through, then we would have to, as a committee, decide what projects to fund, and again, final approval through the New Mexico Vet Board. So unfortunately, it's not going to be a fast process. It'll be as fast as we can make it, but the Vet Board typically meets in January, April, July, and October, so they meet quarterly. So the timeline that I'm kind of looking at would be the application and reporting process recommendations could hopefully be approved by the Vet Board in January if we can get all the work done, and then be able to open the application process shortly after that, and maybe have that open for 1 to 3 months so that everybody could apply. And then again, deciding what projects to fund and then passing that to the Vet Board for approval. So the likely distribution of money would happen July or later of next year. So again, it's a process and there's a lot of work to do, but we want to do it. We want to do it right so that we can target those areas that need it and fund projects that are really good projects and are going to have a lot of impact. So again, the timeline would probably be not till next year, about this time of year would funds be distributed. And again, all of this is an open public process. Public is invited to attend every meeting, and there'll be time for feedback and things like that during this process. Some roadblocks that we've thought of, or that I've thought of, that we want to make sure that we're thinking of as we go through this process. We definitely don't want a complicated application or reporting process. We all know shelters and nonprofits that this money will most likely or typically go to are usually crazy busy as it is. So we want to make sure that it's thorough, but that it's not complicated. We don't want to complicate a process or overly complicated process that doesn't need to be. So that's just a roadblock to keep in mind. Veterinary access is, to me, a huge possible roadblock, especially here in New Mexico. I know that there are service deserts, even in my own county. There are literally people that drive 2 hours one way to come and get their animals spayed and neutered. And that's a huge roadblock for a lot of people. So figuring out how to solve some of those problems in some of these counties is going to be something that needs to overcome, because we know that veterinary access is limited. And I know too, even though we have a few vet clinics here in town, they have troubles themselves recruiting vets, and are getting a lot of brand new vets, which is awesome, but it's still hard to recruit those vets to come in and work here. And then surgery capacity alone. So looking at our public spay and neuter program, I have one vet for my entire shelter for 7,000 animal intakes, and then doing about 1,500 public spay and neuter surgeries per year. We were at capacity. So even if we had more money, we couldn't figure out how to do more surgeries unless we could expand our surgery capacity. So that was a huge roadblock that we had to think of. You know, hiring vets, mobile units, things like that. They're all possibilities to get this done and be able to spend this money and do these procedures. But definitely those roadblocks are something that we're all keeping in mind and understand that we're going to have to overcome some of those. So in the meantime, if you're all have money burning a hole in your pocket and want to know how to get ready to spend it, as individual organizations, really think about your targets and goals. These aren't going to be, looking at this application process, I can generally say that it's going to be a targeted project funds. So if you're in an organization and you want to be able to spend some money, looking at your targets and goals, how many surgeries do you want to do? The number of dog spays, the number of cat spays, how are you going to figure out where you're going to be doing those? Are you doing it by zip code, by neighborhood? Do you already have people in mind? Lower income, you know, things like that you're going to have to really look at to figure out what type of projects you want to fund. For those nonprofits that are going to have income requirements on the funds the help that they distribute, how are you going to vet that income? I know our program was set up through our city council as an income-based program, and it was household income, which is harder to get at. You can't just use a W-2 because that doesn't include household income. So a lot of times we would ask people for their filed tax return, and so many people do not file taxes. So they have no way to prove what their income is. So as a nonprofit, if you're going to vet income, you have to start thinking about that process of how you're going to do that. It's not as easy as it seems, and that's speaking from experience. What system are you going to use? Are you going to use private vet clinics? Are you going to use vouchers? Are you going to do it all yourselves? Like, there's a lot of, like I said, different systems that you can use. It can definitely be vouchers. At this point, looking at what our shelter would do would probably be a voucher system, and partnering with the local vet clinics to figuring out a pricing system and able to use that. Figure out a budget for your projects. You know, if there is going to be any revenue to offset the costs. Your financial information, just having all that information, your I's dotted and your T's crossed, having your EIN number and your business registration number, your nonprofit standing and good, or your nonprofit status and good standing, just making sure that all that's ready to go. And then definitely, again, attend public sessions. We want to be transparent, and this is all going to be a public process. What I'm presenting today is only some possibilities and some likely roads that we will go down. But again, nothing has been decided, and it's going to be a public process. So to get ready to do this, you know, really drill down and think about those projects that you want to fund, and how you're going to do it, and just making sure that you have everything lined up so that you can apply for these funds easily when the application process opens up. And with that, I think we do have quite a few questions, so we will get to those. Okay. So does anyone know if the DMV is processing applications for the spay and neuter license plate? We sent our application and checked months ago and no response, COVID-19 delay. I'm gonna assume yes. I know the funds that we might have available as the sheltering committee have been there for a while. It's nothing, I don't think that we've gotten anything new. So I'm assuming there's just a lag in everything at this point.
Yeah, and we did receive separately a similar question from someone who wanted to know whether Senate Bill 57 was going to impact the funding coming in from the spay neuter license plate or other funding mechanisms that we already have. And so the answer is no. You know, the spay neuter license plate is still there. So there will be even more funds coming in from there. more funds coming in from the tax returns, the PIT D forms. So that little bit will still be coming in and will be added to the money coming in from the pet food manufacturer fee.
What impact might this program have on pre-existing spay and neuter funding services currently available around the state? I'm going to guess it would just bolster them. Hopefully, if they're not at capacity, we can make them at capacity with a few more funding. Like I said, I think we faced the unique thing that we were actually, to be honest, our spay and neuter program was cut due to budget constraints. So hopefully that would refund our program. But I would hope that it would have nothing but a good impact on the things that are already happening. Jessica, I don't know if you have any other.
Completely agree. Yeah, I mean, that is the goal. And I know that there are, you know, there are nonprofits, organizations, shelters that have been doing years of work in terms of going out into communities and holding spay neuter clinics, and their sign-up lists are full. They have long waiting lists. There's a lot of people who really want these services. The only thing missing is the funding to provide the services. So hopefully this is just, solves that problem.
Yeah, I agree. We had our list, we had like a 2-month waiting list for spays. We were scheduling like 2 months out. With neuters, we can get in a little bit quicker, but we were always way backed up with what the demand was versus what our capacity was. So I would just hope that would just be able to help take it to the next level.
Yeah.
How are spay and neuter service providers selected? That would be up to the individual organizations that would be applying for funds. So again, this is going to be driven by shelters and nonprofit organizations that are then going to help people spay and neuter their pets. This isn't necessarily going to be individuals applying for these funds. This is going to be groups that hopefully already have ideas of either bringing in a mobile clinic or partners that they already work with or potentially could work with in order to get this done. So the providers are going to be partners with the animal shelters and nonprofits. How will a low-income person learn of the subsidy for spay and neuter? How does a qualified person identify a vet who's willing to perform the operation for a specified price? Again, that's going to be set by these organizations that are going to apply for funds. So I know our program, people had to fill out an application and show proof of income and proof of residency. And then our fees were based on sliding scale, based on income, but most of them ended up being free. So that's all going to be up to individual organizations. If they're looking to apply for enough funds to provide free surgeries, or if they want to apply for enough funds and have like a 50-50 split, that a person applying for low cost spay and neuter would pay, you know, a $50 fee and they would pick up the rest. And then again, working with those providers, I've already planted seeds with most of the vet clinics in town about getting together and deciding some prices, because they have to be able to not necessarily lose money. They shouldn't be able to make a huge profit, but they need to not be able to lose money if they're providing services like these. So it's going to be boots on the ground, organizations working and making partnerships and kind of making these rules of who they're going to help and who's going to provide that help. Will funds be limited to shelters, or will all veterinarians have access? Again, it's probably going to be an application process. So it's just going to be whoever applies for the funds. So if there are individual vets that want to do that, they certainly could, I believe. We haven't really narrowed down that focus completely, so everything's a possibility at this point.
I think if you scroll up to the top, there's a question from Dave and Eileen Steele. When does the sunset clock start ticking?
Yeah, go ahead.
Given the fact that there is still much to do before funds will be distributed. So probably the best way to explain it is that there isn't really a start time. There is a sunset date that is written into the bill. And so that date is July 1st, 2026. So it's technically, that's 6 years. But so it'll probably be at least, well, the latest would be the 2026 legislative session would be probably the target year that the legislature would look at renewing the law.
There's a question about if the slideshow for this town hall presentation will be available on the APNM website.
I think we're gonna figure out all of the best ways to get this distributed out. I think we still need to make those decisions, but definitely we want to get this information out to people because knowledge is power in this case. We want to make sure that people know how this law is going to work and make sure that spay and neuter service providers and shelters and nonprofits know, you know, what they can look out for in terms of applying for the funds.
Another question, can the funds be used by a shelter on its own stray animal population, or do the funds have to go to low-income animal owners? I believe it's limited to well, not necessarily low-income animal owners, but I believe it's owned animals the way I understand it in general.
Yeah, I definitely, I mean, that is how the law was conceived. You know, I think maybe that's something that the Animal Sheltering Committee and the Vet Board could take a look at, probably get advice from the board's attorney to figure out exactly the best way to interpret that. But I know that, you know, what was anticipated was that, you know, this is about going to serve families, or perhaps, you know, feral or community cats, not necessarily the shelter population, but maybe it's something else.
Yeah, I think the Animal Sheltering Act requires that shelters either spay neuter them themselves or they send them out on contract to be spayed and neutered. So hopefully most shelters already have that in place. But yeah, I think the spirit of the law is definitely for owned or unowned in the sense of like feral or community cats to get those guys done. I love this question actually. The funding will be there, but how do you convince or educate the public to get the spay and neuters done? Personal experience, it's not a problem at all. Like I said, we had a waiting list of over 2 months. We have, since unfortunately our program, like I said, was cut, we have 5 to 10 phone calls a day of people wanting to get their animals spayed and neutered or needing to get their animals spayed and neutered. So I think the low-hanging fruit of the people that are willing to do it and just don't either want to spend the money or have the money to spend are out there. And it's going to take a while before we get to those people that are like, nope, I just don't want to do it. There's the need is so great. And I know I'm just in my little corner of the world, but the need is so great. And I think there's so many people willing to do it. It's just, I believe money is a huge factor. So I love that question, but honestly, there are so many people out there that are willing and wanting to do it. We just have to get them in the door and have the money to help them. Will the fund pay 100% of the cost? Again, that's going to be up to the organizations. If they want to do a copay of some kind, they can do that. You kind of get to design your own project of how you want to spend the money. So again, it's kind of up to the individuals if you want to do a copay or if you don't want to do it completely free. Will the funds be strictly for spay and neuter surgery or is there also for other things like facility improvements or vehicles or similar items? We haven't really decided that yet about what the criteria is for the application process. I think equipment, like surgical equipment, is probably going to be okay. Staffing or contract staffing is probably going to be okay. It kind of depends. Like I said, we haven't really decided what our perfect criteria is, but definitely having that idea in the back of your heads, of everybody's heads, what's going to make life easier and what's going to make this happen. A vehicle to help transport those animals is definitely a possibility. Again, we haven't decided yet. So that's a great question. It's just we haven't answered it yet because we haven't had a chance to meet. Are local 501c3 rescue group shelters eligible for SB 57 funds? Absolutely. I think it's the way the bill was written, it's municipal government agencies definitely, and nonprofits are the main ones. Will the fund pay for clinics to help rural folks? I can't talk anymore. Like in northern and southern. Okay, yeah. So definitely. Again, there has to be a driver. Or not a driver, but there has to be a group that's deciding how this is going to happen. We're not just going to throw money at someplace without a plan. I believe that there needs to be a group or a nonprofit or a shelter or even a community government, even if they don't have a shelter, that has a plan in place of how to spend the money that needs to happen. But the statewide is going to need to be eligible, and I would hope after a couple of years that we would be able to fund almost every project that is needed. The first couple of years when the money is going to roll in a little bit slower, it'll be a little bit pickier with the projects that we fund, but after that I would hope that there'd be pretty wide open availability. And again, using that wonderful APNM data, we can look at who has services, where the high intake is, where the high euthanasia rate is, and we can help weigh those projects accordingly. These are great questions. How does this funding mechanism fit in with existing funding programs such as discounts for those seeking spay and neutering for their pets? As far as I'm concerned, it goes hand in hand. I think this is just additional funds, so anybody that's already applying for grants or has partnerships or is funding a program, again, hopefully this just adds to it and enhances what is already happening. Jessica, I don't know if you have any other.
Yeah, 100%, you know, because I think there's still probably many members of our community where even those discounts are not quite enough. If they still can't really access, if they can't take a half day or a whole day off of work to drive hours and wait for their animal to be sterilized and then go home, then the discount doesn't quite help them. Or the discount just still might not be enough. They still can't afford that remaining amount. And so, you know, there may need to be some thought put into just offering some free services in certain areas. So yeah, I think it's all just going to kind of blend together and try to serve all of the different aspects of the need out there.
Another question, I'm a veterinary nurse wondering how I can help this program become successful. Are there ways to convince private clinics to get involved? Great, Leslie. Being a part of that public process as we continue on, watching that the vet board website for meeting notices and agendas, and if you want to be a part of that process, it would be amazing. Convince private clinics to get involved. I think that could be a roadblock in some places, but I think if you do it right and plant some seeds and really create those partnerships, that's what's going to help. That's, again, speaking from personal experience, you know, planting those seeds with those vet clinics, most of them want to help in some way, shape, or form. A lot of them are busy themselves and overwhelmed themselves, but I've started that conversation for years of, well, if we ever write this grant or do this and get money, how can we expand our surgery capacity and how can you guys help? So I think it's just a way, especially if you're a veterinary nurse working at one of those clinics, talking, you know, just planting those seeds and talking to them saying, hey, I hear there's some money that's going to be available. Do you think we'll be able to help out? Would be great, because I think the more support that they have from the public and wanting to help will go a long way. So start those conversations now. We have, you know, a good 6 months probably until the application process starts. So there's some time to plant those seeds and start those partnerships. Because I think, you know, the vet clinics want to see happy, healthy animals too. And the more animals that are spayed and neutered, the healthier they tend to be and the less roaming there tend to be, and get to those guys. The ones the ones roaming are the ones that need to be convinced, and I agree. And if there's groups out there targeting like feral cats, those are going to be included. I think that's another question just further down. we have people doing feral colonies with our help. Will that be covered? Most definitely. Again, I think people have to take a certain amount of ownership with those groups to get those cats done, but the free roaming or feral cats are definitely included, and then owned animals. So getting those free roaming cats, and even if you're, we're right next to Navajo Nation, and we know that there tends to be some roaming animals there, but even working with groups to get free roaming dogs if there are some. But those feral cat colonies definitely are included. A lot of, when I was doing the research, looking at Maryland and West Virginia, a lot of cat colonies or cat neighborhoods were being targeted with project funds. So most definitely we can help those guys. How can I find out if our nonprofit humane society that runs the animal shelter in Lincoln County is included in the survey? I'm assuming they're talking about APNM data from Lincoln County.
Yeah, so if you go to apnm.org, our website, you can access information about our survey. There's like a banner at the top, a sliding banner. If you wait for the one or search for the one that talks about the shelter results, click there and then scroll down. We created a map of New Mexico. So you can go click on your county or any county. The shelters in that county will pop up, and then you can see total county or individual facility data. So that is probably, I think, the easiest way for you to just real quickly see if the shelter that you're thinking about is part of our survey results.
The next couple of questions are all APNM, but could APNM use social media to notify people about the spay and neuter program?
Yeah, we will definitely be doing everything that we can to promote the program. I think at this point, we need to have the Department of Agriculture and the Animal Sheltering Committee and the Vet Board set the stage for how the program is going to work. We will certainly keep our supporters notified about how those rulemaking processes work, because like Stacie said, this is going to be a public process deciding how this is going to work. The board is going to hold public hearings to talk about this and take public input. So we'll keep you apprised so that you can get involved and offer your comments on the new rules. And then, yes, once everything is we hope to be a really strong partner to our state in helping to roll out the program. Thank you, David. Let's see what else.
I can help answer this one too, even though it's directed toward APNM. How can APNM help educate Indian tribes to spay and neuter their animals? Speaking again from experience of being part of our county is in Navajo Nation, Shiprock area. There, again, they want to spay and neuter. I know Soul Dog is a wonderful partner out there, and I mean, their clinics are packed with waiting lists like crazy. So I think that, again, there is still a lot of desire out there to get them done. I can't speak for the whole state, but so I think there's probably other ways APNM can certainly help. But again, I think there's a lot of people out there willing to do it. They just need the help to get it done.
Absolutely.
And then will this fund?
Christy? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we got some kudos. Good job. Will this fund mobile spay and neuter clinics? Would these mobile clinics go to people who are not near a vet? I would hope so. I know there's, like I said, Soul Dog is definitely on the reservation, and there's a few others throughout the state. I think attracting more to this area would be a great project or target for some of this, because like I said, there are definitely some service deserts out there that they don't have easy access to a vet. So more mobile spay and neuter clinics would be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to have to be a really necessary piece of the puzzle, because if you look at You know, if you look at the data that, you know, has come out of the shelter survey, where we have the highest shelter animals per capita is those rural areas. You know, that it's large geographic areas, smaller people population, and they have way more animals compared to their people population. And in those rural parts, like Stacie said, there's just much fewer resources there for people. So that'll definitely have to be part of the equation, I imagine.
Another one quick that just came in, how about paid internships for vet students? Sure. Again, it's all possibilities right now. I think thinking of those project ideas and what groups need to get the spay and neuter done is going to be really important during this next phase. As we're kind of developing this, hopefully these groups can be thinking of how do they get the vets in here? How do they get the mobile clinics in here? Do they want to build their own mobile clinic and ask for funds for that? You know, the sky's the limit at the moment, I think. Again, the funding will be a little bit slower to come in for the first 3 years, but once we hit that stride, there's going to be a lot of money out there to help. So, you know, getting vet students in there, again, speaking from experience, you know, those experienced vets are going to be able to do a lot more. You know, 20 a day or more, you know, is what we would do in our clinic. But having a new vet student or an intern vet student, they could do about 1 or 2. So definitely helpful, but just they can't do the volume without the experience. So, but sky's the limit as far as projects goes. Be speaking to your local vet clinics or mobile clinics that are licensed in New Mexico and see what we can get done, what we can fund.
So that's the last question, other than this wonderful kudos from Christy and Ashley. And so I just want to take a quick second to actually spread around that kudos, because, you know, yes, of course, this was a passion project of APNM, but by no means did we do this alone. So many of you who are tuned in right now, I'm seeing your names. You guys are awesome. You helped make this happen. There were dozens and dozens of shelters, rescue groups, mayors, city managers, county commissioners, animal control officers, police officers, like so many people in the community were like, yes, this is the solution that we need, and got really seriously involved. And so I just want to say thank you to all of you, all of them. Veterinarians too, really, really key in the passage of this bill. So it was really a group effort, and it makes me just so proud of our state.
Well, and let me chime in. I wanted to thank you, Stacie and Jessica, both for this incredible and so informative presentation. I personally learned a lot, and I was very impressed as to how many people were interested enough to ask all these wonderful questions. And you guys had answers for all of them. So that was so great. And some of you have asked if we're recording this, and yes, we are. So we will be sharing this information with you probably via the website, but we'll let you know where it is. So with that being said, thank you everyone for taking the time to be here to spend with us this afternoon. And we hope you have a great evening.